Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Roberto Graubin from Chile, and he is a coach and but also quite an interesting person. And I've just met him, but we've already established some really deep connections that I think you will find interesting as our conversation is going in a direction I don't think either one of us expected, 15 minutes ago. So welcome, Roberto, and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and tell us a little bit about what life in Chile is like, and whatever you want to say. I mean, I'm going to be interested in everything that you say today, based on our initial introduction.
Thanks very much first for the invitation, Ed. Really happy to be here on this show today. I've heard a couple of your podcasts already, and it's really intriguing to see where our conversation will go. Sure, let's try and make a long story short. I'm Chilean, from Chilean father, born in England, and bounced around the world a bit. So, but currently living in Chile. Yes, my current profession is as a coach and leadership facilitator. I also do consultancy work. I translate from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. I also like singing, reading lots of books and comics, and generally having my life is actually talking. Whereas you're a coach, you're asking questions and listening a lot. And when I'm off job, how could I say it? When I'm not working, I'm talking to my friends. I'm talking to people. We're exchanging views on what's happening in the world. We share books. We share philosophy. We share ways of understanding and making sense of the world. So,
are you one of these guys? Are you one of these guys that can talk to anyone? That it's you walk into a place and it's full of strangers, and you're going to find some people to talk to merely because that's what you do.
Well, actually, this is quite funny because I used to be, as a young person, really, really timid, and but now adult, in my adult age, actually I do sort of kind of Browning motion when you get into a meeting, sort of bounce around different places till I find someone who I can talk to. And generally I do find I have the ability to establish conversations with most people, even people with really, really extreme views and really opposed views to mine. I'm as a coach, of course, we teach, you have to have the difficult conversations, or you treat people to have these difficult conversations. And, if I don't do it myself, then how the hell am I going to teach others or help others to do the same? So I go out there and find people who have really opposing political views, and I just try to talk. Sometimes I will obviously shut down and walk away, but it's interesting at least to know these opinions and understand where they're coming from. Try not to judge. Yeah, I try to do that a lot, actually.
So would you say there's a difference between having a conversation and being in a situation where you're talking at and past one another?
Well, actually, yes, there is, because I study with, I don't know if you've heard or read Professor Humberto Maturana, who is one of the, a famed biologist and here in Chile. And he also had a lot to say about profound conversations and philosophy. And he would talk about disjointed dimensions. So conversations are happening in two dimensions simultaneously, but they don't touch. They're just in disjointed dimensions.
Yes.
So that you can be having you can have a conversation where basically we mesh, we ebb and flow, and there's this other kind of conversation where one person talks in one direction, the other person talks in the other, and they don't meet in between.
It's interesting when that happens, when you're a consultant and you're having that kind of conversation with your client, and you're not on the same wavelength, you're not communicating, and it's really a great challenge.
I also think it's really even more evident. I would take it out of the business world for a little bit and put it into our real life political situations. People, they just talk over people. Politicians talk over people. They talk at them, but they don't talk either for them or to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that you've got the politicians saying one thing, and people and countries and societies are needing other things, and it just doesn't come together.
They're just the way I describe that, they're just projecting their personality into a social space expecting people to accept that and be impressed by that.
And it's even worse when they're projecting or they're trying to stuff this ideology down your throat, which is even worse.
Yeah.
In my opinion, of course.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you. So you came to me. You were introduced to me by Kenneth Mickelson, who is the co-author of the Neo-Generalist, and who was one of my guests on the podcast several months ago. And how did you come to know Kenneth? What's that connection?
Kenneth, I think that's a really nice story I'd like to share here, because Kenneth has been so generous with me. Well, him and Richard, of course. But this all started because somebody on LinkedIn posted a small sort of infographic about the neo-generalist leader, or being a neo-generalist. I thought, this is really interesting. So I took that post, and then I found a TED talk by Kenneth. Okay, so he has a TED talk. I heard that, and I said, no, I need to know more about this. And, Googling around, I finally found the book, which was actually quite difficult to find. And me and a friend of mine here in Chile, we both ordered it. And it was such an impression on me reading this book and finding myself there. So finally, I find this is me. This is how I am. This is how I've been. This is how I understand and see the world. And it was such an impression on me that I wrote to Kenneth, because his mail is there. I said, Kenneth, this has hit me so hard. I think more people need to know about this, especially in the Spanish-speaking world. So can I translate this book? And he wrote back, and he said, can we have a Zoom meeting? We had this meeting. I told him a little bit about myself, well, quite a lot, actually. He said he asked some questions. We talked a lot, and he saw that I had an understanding of what it means, or what it, sort of first-hand experience of being a neo-generalist. And he said, okay, go ahead. Let me talk to Richard about this. He talked to Richard, and they both came back saying that if I could take the time, and if I really want to do this, and go ahead, and we'll see what comes out of it. And well, I translated the book. It's now in stages of, the tweaking, like Word sometimes changes names around. So Isaias Berlin instead of Isaiah Berlin. So I'm kind of looking through all these small details before I send the final version over.
Proofreading it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing kind of like a second proofreading, because I translated it last year. I finished the book, but I'm in this proofreading stage before I send it. And Richard and Kenneth have already spoken to their publishers, and they're really, at least they're open to the idea of publishing in Spanish. They see it's a good opportunity. So and I get a credit on the book as well, which is kind of, I wasn't expecting it, but Kenneth and Richard said, we'd like to give you credit. I mean, it's probably a lot of things that you've had to reinterpret to put it into the Spanish language. So that's also a sort of, I wasn't expecting it, but it's a nice gift as well. I mean, the book in itself is a wonderful gift to people, but the being able to do the translation and really kind of get on top of the whole definition of neo-generalist and finding myself in there as well has been a real gift.
That's fantastic.
And we talk with Kenneth, maybe once, it's been more frequent now, actually. Maybe once every 2 months, have conversations. We had established a sort of friendship, even though we haven't even met in person yet.
Yeah. Yeah. How about that? That's fantastic. So, well, tell me your take on the neo-generalist idea. I mean, you feel like it's describing you. So what is it that you feel as validating who you are?
Let me see if I understand your question. Why is it so important to me? Why does it validate who I am?
What is it saying about you that you would like other people to know? Maybe that's the way to say it. This is that you would welcome to be called a neo-generalist in that sense.
One of the reasons, I mean, there's quite a few, but I think one of the reasons that is really sort of powerful is that most people, or most of us, say that we have an assigned value of X. So I'm this and that, right? But the book really understands, and what really helped me to understand that what this really means. This value that we have it's not fixed. It's open, it's changing, it's dynamic. And I love the idea of the Mobius loop, because basically we're moving constantly between, maybe you could call it polarities. I wouldn't call it polarities as in extremes, but I would call it we're moving in these two areas of life, which most people are kind of oblivious to, or resistant to. Some people, I guess. But I think the important value of the book is, establishing the value of X being us, and that value, understanding it, that it's plural, it's multiple, it's the multiple self. The how can you say it? It's been said so well in the book that if I put it in other words, it just doesn't live up to it. Well, but we are the best words are T.S. Whitman. I contain multitudes, I think is the phrase, right? That just, it hit me a lot. I am that person, I guess, and we all are.
Well, I think it's one of those things, and the other term that can be applied here, which I think is a little bit different, is that of polymath. A polymath is a person who is very curious and has a broad picture of the world, and they find a facility for entering, and I think it's true with the Neo-Generalism, find the facility of walking into almost any situation and finding a way to bring value to that environment. And a lot of that's because it's all interesting to them. It's all interesting, and they learn from it. And everybody they meet, this goes back to our conversation, the initial conversation. It's because they're going to teach me something. They're going to, and I'm going to learn something, and it's going to be fascinating as a result. And it's going to change me, but it's also going to change them, because I'm going to connect with them, and I'm going to have some kind of something that happens which is special for both of us.
Completely. Every human interaction is transformative.
So what do you think, and I'm going to what we discussed before we went on the show, which has to do with comics. And I mean, you're a lover of comics, and I love graphic novels, anime and manga, and I love that stuff, which is separate. It's the same, but it's separate. They're different forms of the same sort of artistic visualization of ideas and stories and that sort of thing. I mean, people who know this stuff will understand what the characterization we're talking about. But what is it that those visualizations of those stories pointing to you? What's that telling you that is so fascinating? Well, I think let me restate this. So what is it that attracts you to these stories?
And
maybe the story that you really like, that really,
I'm going to put it in adult terms, because when I started reading comics, obviously in adolescence or in my younger years, it was, I don't know, it was all about the action, I guess, and captivating stories. Okay. And now when you're an adult, you look back on that and you see that what these stories are really about, they're about the human condition. I mean, one of my favorite, obviously, is Batman as a character. And there's so much to learn about the human condition and overcoming obstacles and honing your skills to acute refinement, and understanding the world around you. All these things are present in these stories, and I think they're really good at character shaping as well. At least when you read them at an early age, and later on in life, they're really good for reflecting about the human condition. I think that's the word that we're looking for. And there's also this whole thing about, you see all the human archetypes that are present. They're also present in all these characters. The strong one, the fool, the thinker, the courageous one, etc., etc., etc. And I think it's all the more relevant today when you don't see these people in real life. I mean, this book that we were discussing about, super gods, Grant Morrison, which is a great comic writer. What he's trying to say is that people find in these fantasy characters, be they comics, be they science fiction, be they heroes, I don't know, Sherlock Holmes or Wolverine or whoever, you find people to who you aspire to become. And the problem is that today we're not seeing these people who we aspire to become or to follow in real life. That's why the massive, how would I say, this massive appeal of all these Marvel movies, the DC universe, any science fiction character that comes along, people attach to these characters.
Yeah.
Because they show ideals, they show archetypes, they show aspirations, they show talent, they show inspiration, they show a lot of things that in the dull real life you probably don't find, or they're very difficult to find.
You know what I find is that the stories, the plots, are less interesting than the characters themselves. I think the way the characters interface with the plot itself, how they deal with stress, how they deal with trauma, how they deal with intimacy, all those sorts of questions are ones that we all deal with. But in real life, we have a very difficult time of facing up to those things because our examples in real life, real human beings that are presented to us through the same medium of the screen are not real to us. And these characters, these drawn characters in these comics and these graphic novels, they're much more real to us because we see them suffering, we see them struggling, we see them having to face crisis, we see them having to face people who are out to destroy them. We all feel these things at the same time, and I think that's why these things have such a power to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I will take Batman as an example again. There's a famous vignette where he's about to go into Arkham Asylum to beat the hell out of Joker, and I can't remember the actual words, but he's outside is obviously is Commissioner Gordon, and he says to him, "Don't go in there because you can't become what they are. You can't go do what you think you know. Revenge, it's not the way. It's what they do. It's not what you do. You have to know how to walk that fine line, because if not, you become one of them." I think that's just it. It's obviously this understanding of the human psyche, and it also gives you limits. As you read these stories, you say, okay, there's a limit between being I don't know, in this case, following your own path and falling off it. And what's the dark side of that? And that's just good for us as well, because it helps you also to look at your own limits and limitations and see how far you can go before one of your strengths turns into liability, or it ends up hurting somebody else. I think there's a lot of things to learn in these stories. What you said: trauma, recuperation, resilience, operating under stress, etc.
The Marvel movies are great. They're great action flicks. But the Marvel stories that I really like are the ones that they turned into TV series. And those TV series I like because here each one of these characters has something about them which makes them extraordinary. And it is both something that's beautiful and also something that's filled with conflict. And that is so true of us, as people. We want to become a part of a group. We want to fit in. And yet the very things that we're really good at, or the very thing that is our central talent, makes us not as easily to fit into that group. And so we end up having to fight that tension between fitting in and then being ourselves. And I see that coming out of these stories in many ways, and that is so true of human nature and human life in the modern world in particular.
Yeah, there's a thing I think that is really good about, for example, what you say. So how do we fit in? The thing that teaches that you can get back for, and children can really take these things. There's a positive side to this, like Guardians of the Galaxy or X-Men or Avengers, is that different talents come together and make incredible teams. And we can put that in an organizational structure as well. So similitude or the sameness doesn't get you very far. When you get different talents and people with really wild kind of views and talents and strengths, and you put them together and you get this fantastic thing. You can have a raccoon, a stick thingy like Groot, a couple of aliens of different colors, and a human, and you put them together, and what you get the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And you get all these weird mutants with all these powers, and they come together and they make this amazing team, which is excellent. Right? So there's a lot of lessons to be learned there, you know.
And they're just all various versions of human beings.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's really true. Well,
and if you look at, sorry, let me put the business note on this. If you look at the studies, for example, like the Google Aristotle studies, they say that the power of the team is not in the individual, it's in the combination of how they relate to each other, and it's in their different strengths being put to use towards a common goal. The power is in I can't find the word, it's the power is in diversity,
and the collective of the diversity that comes together, where they
exactly
freely joining together, and in so doing they have to sacrifice some of their ego in order for the greater benefit of the group to come through. It's that dynamism is, I think, is a major feature in the world that you're working in and I'm working in, which is how do we help organizations function better? And what I find is that the structure is often the thing that gets in the way, and so you're siloed and your divisions, and everybody gets gets compartmentalized. And even if you have the team gets compartmentalized, everybody, well, you're going to do this part, you're going to do this part, and everybody has their own part to play. And yet at some point you have to break down all those walls and say, how do we together do this to achieve something greater than that which we can do as an individual?
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. One thing is the power of diversity, and the other is the power of connection. It's how people relate is the key to effectivity, to efficiency, and to results. It's the power of connection. So it's not also the diverse elements, but they need to talk, and they need to relate, and they need to have a high amount of connections. There's a Chilean mathematician and psychologist, I don't know if you've heard of him, Marcial Losada, who studied this, and he came up with three important things that make a high performance team. And one of them is us versus I. The other is the 3-to-1, positive connections to negative, and the other one is questions versus asking versus defending. And all of this has to do with the power of connection. The more connections, the more exponential the results. I mean, if we put this in musical terms, as I come from a musical background, there's this wonderful example that he used to use. He would put a Bach fugue or intervention. Any Bach fugue would be good. Put these inventions on screen and have people listening to them as the notes come on screen, and you see all these notes interacting. And he would ask the public, it says, what makes this a brilliant product? What makes this a masterful piece of work? People would say, well, it sounds beautiful, the aesthetics, blah blah blah. And he says, well, did you count the notes on screen? Oh yeah, there's lots of notes. He said, but it's not the quantity of notes that's important, it's the amount of connections in between them. That's the beauty of a Bach fugue or an invention, is that they're all talking at the same time, but somehow this comes together in this beautiful conversation.
Yeah, I watched a couple of years ago. I watched a video of a guy doing a presentation on Bach's counterpoint, and he was talking not to people who are musicians or people who knew how to read music, but he was trying to explain to them why counterpoint was this genius thing that Bach had developed, and that no one really else was. Those who tried to follow Bach were following what he was doing, but he had created something pretty unique in that counterpoint, which is, I think, what you're referring to, and I think that's a way that we also connect in our groups, in our families, and in our communities. We talk to one another, and I think it comes back to the value of the neo-generalist in that regard, because the neo-generalist becomes sort of the catalyst for the people who kind of isolated, to find a place to bring what they have to share to the group. And that catalytic aspect of it, where the neo-generalist is appreciating all these people, and they're kind of calling them to bring their talent and their gifts to the group, then that's when something really beautiful happens.
Yeah, it's a nice analogy you bring there. You bring together the counterpoint and the catalyst, and it's just that. Say, we're catalysts for counterpoint, because counterpoint has if you think of it etymologically, right? Counter and point. So there's lots of converging points of view, and they're coming together. Yeah. Counterpoint, exactly. So you've got one guy talking in this level. There's somebody coming in on here, and there's a third voice, and the catalyst is the one that makes, when they come together, when they sound in harmony. Sometimes that has to come from outside. Sometimes it comes from inside. But the important thing is to make it happen.
I don't remember what the YouTube channel is, but there's a YouTube channel of a guy who is showing, he's taking different sections of different classical pieces of piano music, and he's doing that very thing. He's showing how these things get put together, and the genius of putting them together, whether it's a Bach thing or a Rachmaninoff piece or something, and not knowing how to read music and not even know how to play an instrument. I'm looking at that and I'm getting it, because this is a reflection of the way we work as people, and we communicate as people. And the fact that you can apply music to human interaction is a pretty special thing.
It is. I write quite a lot on LinkedIn, and I'm trying very hard to make connections between art and leadership, and that's kind of my next. I think that's my next step. I'm trying to write a book on this.
So, well, tell us what you're seeing there. Kind of give us the pitch on what you're doing, because I'm very interested in how you're seeing that.
I don't actually have a pitch as such.
Okay.
But where does this start from? I guess it starts from this annoying thing that has been annoying me for a long time, which is everybody talks about leadership as an art. And I think that's a great load of horseshit. Sorry if I say it that way, because it's a wrong understanding of what it means to lead. And second, it's a wrong understanding of what art is. So that's where I started from. So I started thinking, okay, but how can we make the right connections between what art can show us and what that can rebound onto what it means to be a leader, or more than the person of the leader, it's how to lead. And I'll give you a musical example just to illustrate that. So you just said Rachmaninoff, and that reminded me of a post that I wrote a couple of months ago. And there's this one, I don't know if you know the second piano concerto, which is famous, right?
Yes.
And the second movement was, it was lifted by Eric Carmen to do this wonderful song called All by Myself. But the second movement starts off with this beautiful dialogue between the flute and the piano. And the question there is, who leads who? Because the piano's, the piano and the orchestra are sort of accompanying, and the flute's kind of inducing them to accompany, and at the same time the flute's leading. But then the melody is taken by the piano and the orchestra, and the flute accompanies. So you're saying, who leads who here? And what the product is, this most beautiful melody that obviously Rachmaninoff wrote, and he knew how to put it down on paper. But in the execution, it's who leads who, and it's also, maybe there isn't a leader there present exactly. It's just the harmony. There's just the sieg. And I think the sieg or the flow is more important than the who. And that's one of the things that we have to, I think, that you have to take leadership out of the person of the leader, and you have to put it in this shared space where there's, how would you call it in English? Collaborative leadership, participative leadership.
Well, it's
horizontal, leadership where everybody in the team can lead. You can put it in that space. I haven't found the right translation for it yet.
I would say that we're all leaders and we're all followers at the same time.
Exactly. Distributed leadership, for example. We're all leaders, we're all followers, exactly.
And
but that's just an example, the Rachmaninoff piece.
If you got a circle, I mean, if you got a team of 5, each person brings something to the table, and the expectation is you lead from your strength and you follow from your support and your and your affirmation of the group's other strengths, and you figure out somehow that you bring marshal all those together to take your group somewhere that they wouldn't be able to go as an individual. And I think that's what happens with a symphony orchestra. I constantly am amazed. I watch. I subscribe to the Berlin Philharmonic channel, and I watch them play, and I'm constantly amazed, not just at the fact that they're playing, but the fact that there was a written map of how they were going to play, which is the musical charts, and it's just a remarkable thing to me. It's to me this supreme or sublime example of what human creativity and human collaboration can actually achieve if we choose to kind of let our egos go and be willing to join with everyone else in contributing.
Exactly. The key there is the final word you said is contributing. But I'd also say the key is not the map.
That's right.
I'm sorry, but the key is, okay, you have the composer who says, he has annotations, this is forte, this is piano, this is an adagio. You have certain indications. But what brings them together? It's not necessarily the map. It's, well, okay, you've got the conductor in front. He's the one who helps people understand the emotion that is there, the intent. We could call it a leitmotif. What is the motif that is here? Okay, yeah. And the conductor is not the one who's like, do this, do that, do that. That's what people think he does. But what they don't see is the rehearsal. Is he's helping people understand this phrase, how this comes together, why you have to be silent here, why you have to bring it up. He works with the orchestra in different parts. Okay, let's do bar 61 to bar 78. I want to hear the metals, because something that they're saying there which is relevant. So it's the person who articulates all these voices and helps them come together. It's not necessarily the map. More important is the person who helps them articulate and how they listen to one another. And you can extrapolate that to a jazz band as well, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Which is another way of seeing the same.
So do you have a definition of art? Do you have a definition?
No, I don't. I'm stuck at writing this because I think I've sort of dived into the deep end and having to define all these terms. But in simple, I guess art is the expression of human emotion in manifold forms that impacts and makes you think, tries to make meaning of the world. I think in simple, it could be that.
Is there a spiritual dimension to art?
Oh, definitely.
So
just listen to Bach, for example.
What would that look like? What would that look like?
The spiritual dimension?
Yeah,
what does it look like?
I want to help you define these things because I'm interested in what you think. So what would be the spiritual dimension of art?
Well, I think there's first the declaration. I mean, if you think about, okay, I can give you two examples from art. One is from Bach. I mean, he wrote all his music is dedicated to the Lord.
Right.
So you've got the inspiration and the declaration. And you've also got the sort of transcendence feeling. Here's an example from another part of art. Antonio Gaudí, who's the famous Catalan architect, when he started the Sagrada Familia, which this wonderful cathedral, he declared, I will do this now, not for money. I will do this for God and for my people.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew when he started this, he started the Sagrada Familia, I think when he was like in his 50s, maybe, I can't remember exactly. And obviously he knew at the time that he wouldn't ever see it finished.
Yeah.
So there's this idea of I think behind art, there's also an idea of giving something which I don't want to call it specifically legacy, but it's giving something there's a giving which transcends me. It goes to others and it has a purpose further than its own sense. I mean, how can you say this?
Is it inviting people to come in and join the meaning or the purpose of the art as it's been expressed by the artist, it's a connection between the artist and the person who is viewing the art or engaged with the art. Is that a part of that? Is it a relationship? Maybe there's a way to.
Oh, art, that's a really simple definition, which I do love. Art is a relationship. It's what happens between the product, the artist, and the person. Because you can relate to Rodin's The Thinker, and it may even relate to itself. So yeah. It might also relate to what the artist was thinking or trying to put towards, put into the world at that time. So yes, the art is a relationship. Point number one, it's a relationship. Second, it would be there's an invitation, there's a declaration of something, I guess. Even in the worst art, like Duchamp's, the toilet bowls, for example, which I think is at the same time it's shocking, but at the same time, okay, it's contextual. So there's something happening at that point in time where you wanted to say something. So you can look at it in two dimensions. You can look at it in the emotional relationship you generate there, and you can look at it from a logical or a rationale that says, okay, why is this here? So that the art can help us to it has the emotional dimension. It also has a sort of a why, a what.
So how do we take this view of art that you have described to us and apply it in the more mechanical places of the world, like businesses and society, where we're all parts of a machine? How does art get injected into those situations in a meaningful way?
Well, I think we have to knock down this 20th or 19th century view of a mechanical industry. We have to knock down this. It's an ontological thing, isn't it? We believe, and we have normalized this all of the language of leadership and business is mechanical. It's processes, it's parts, it's systems, it's whatever. And we have to switch. Firstly, I think we have to switch from that language to another kind of language. It has to do with inspiration, has to do with emotion, with transcendence, with love, I guess, with deep connection. These are two worlds that we have to do the shift. It's move. That's why I like the idea of the neo-Renaissance, for example. Because here's a wonderful thing, because we are now in the world that has its best version it ever will be, or we're living in times where less mortality, infant mortality rates, less rates of hunger on a general scale, most advanced in technology and science and health. The world is at its best as it's ever been. And what happened in the Renaissance when Florence was like this? Was it Medici? I can't remember the name of the leader. He says, okay, we are the richest. We have abundance. We have everything that we need. What did he say? Oh, now we're going to invest in philosophy and art. I mean, I think that's just I think that's the tipping point. Why do we need the new Renaissance for business and for the world, I guess? Is we have to make this shift from the mechanical to the artistic. And that means, putting focus on things like silence and complexity and synchrony, sintonia, which is in English, which is kind of fine-tuning the emotions. It has to do with systems thinking and not individual thinking. I know it's still mechanical, but the system, you have to look at the whole. It's like looking at the Bach. You can't look at organic. You can't understand. Yeah, it's organic. You can't understand the fugue investigating its individual parts. You have to listen to the whole. It's the same when you look at a Miro or a Kandinsky picture. You can't sort of look at the blobs individually. You have to look at the whole to get the impression. You don't even have to understand it, which is also a thing. It's just what happens to you. I mean, that leadership is the space between people, and that's an emotional space. It's what Otto Scharmer would call, this fertile, the fertile ground, and that's where you need to work. And art has a lot to do there. It inspires, it creates, it gives you a million perspectives. It gives you to make complex things out of simple things, or you make the simple out of the complex. That's why I talked about complexity. It helps you fine tune
Well, I think you have makings of a very important book. I
I
think
hope I
you
can
have
write
some,
it.
well, you got to go write it, of course, but I think you have the germination of the seed that's going to sprout into something quite beautiful. Because I agree with you that we need new ways of looking at everything that breaks us out of this mechanistic mindset. And I think it's I mean, I see that when I ask you the spiritual, I see that as a transcendent realm, but it's also the realm of all existence, and it's also the realm where everything is related to everything else, and that we live in relationship to not just one another, but also to our comic books and our families, and the things that we love or things that we are in relationship with. The things that we're discovering are things that we're in relationship, and I think that's where the art becomes a way of describing things. I was thinking, we were talking earlier about comic books, and I told you about reading Shigeru Mizuki's four-part book called Showa: The History of Japan. And what I liked about it is he contrasted, and this is an anime manga treatment of the history of Japan. He tells his story of going through the war, Second World War, and then he tells Japan's story, and he puts these things together, and it's so different than reading just a dry history book of the history of Japan, between the 30s and the 40s and 50s. It's so much more real and tangible, and it engages your emotions, because you're now engaged with this character who is Shigeru, his experience of being in the war. And so it's sort of semi-autobiographical. But I think that's the kind of art that you're talking about, which is where we become engaged with it. That's why we like the Grant Morrison idea of the super gods being not really gods in a transcendent sense, but much more the people that we aspire to become. And and if we had aspiration in that way, imagine each one of us having aspiration to be the very best of ourselves. That would be pretty cool. So that's what I see the opportunity coming from your exploration of art and in the world. So
Yeah, it's still in diapers at this time. I've written about, I don't know, I've written of one chapter maybe, and I'm stuck on these terms, because I think, like I said, I dived into the deep end of really difficult things like defining art, beauty, harmony, and radiance, which is kind of the four things that are in my, I wouldn't call it a model yet, but that are kind of like the basis or the bedrock for this. It's really difficult to find. How do you define beauty? How do you define harmony? How do you define radiance? It's difficult. It's very difficult.
well, having written a book of leadership where I pushed back against all the conceptions of leadership that existed in the 20th century, I would say you just tell a story. Tell a story which illustrates what you feel, what you think, and you let the story be the definition. And in my sense, leadership is not a role or a title in an organization. I'd say it's all leadership begins with personal initiative to create impact that makes a difference that matters. And you can tell a story about that. I can tell stories about hundreds of people who have done simple things to make a difference in their communities. And in that sense, they were like artists, and they have started a discipline of doing things. And I was talking this morning with a man from Africa who has a desire to start a university in his country. And so we're talking about how, so he's taking initiative like that. And it's going to be a work of art, because it's going to bring all these people in to equip them to go out and do great things in their world.
Yeah. Right. What a wonderful story. Somebody who wants to start a university.
How about that? So,
yeah.
So tell us how we can find you. We wanted to have more interaction with you.
Okay, well, I don't use Instagram so much. I'm more on LinkedIn, so they can find me by my name on LinkedIn, Roberto Bravo Graubin. That's that. And my business work webpage, which is www.ludicaconsultores.cl. That's LUDICA Consultores, which is CONSULT .ores.cl. Sorry, trying to do this in Spanish.
I could probably find it at LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, I'll send it in the chat if you want.
Yeah, that
and find me there, and on Facebook, my name, Roberto Bravo G. Roberto Bravo G.
Well,
and everything obviously is mainly in Spanish, but as a bilingual person, I read and obviously write in English as well. So anyone who wants to write to me, who wants to talk, just write to me in English. It doesn't matter. I'll get back to you, of course.
Well, I'm excited about your future because
thank you.
I mean, you're starting with something. You're venturing off into the unknown, and that's really exciting. And if for no other reason, that's why you came on here today. I think because so many other people need to have the sense that I can venture off into the unknown and go discover what I need to know to be the person that I want to be and to have the impact that I want to have in the world that I want it to become. I mean, I think that's really the way it is. So I'm really glad to get to know you, and
thanks very much.
I'm sure we're going to have some more conversations, and we can have them right here on the podcast as you cross those little demarcation lines where, oh, now I understand. Oh, now I understand. If you just send me a note saying, now I understand, then we'll say, okay, well, let's record that. Let's talk about that, because, your articulation of that is really helpful to us because it shows how you are learning, and we can learn by how you are learning. I think this is why I'm doing this for this reason, is so that it's an example to others, a demonstration to others of what is possible when we decide what we're going to go be different and explore what's out there.
Thanks for that. I just love the way that you articulated that last phrase. It's, venturing into the unknown, which is finding yourself along the way with conviction and everything. That's the neo-generalist way, I guess,
I think it is. I think it is.
It is. Venturing into the unknown. Definitely.
And what's interesting is I didn't really have any way of talking about this until I was in my mid-60s. And so I knew all along there was something, there was something that caused me to have this big picture view of the world that I didn't deal with details well, and I didn't fit into the traditional academic world very well, but I didn't know what that was, and no one I knew really understood that either. So, and then here Kenneth and Richard show up with this idea, and they wanted to interview me, and I said, oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess I am that. So it was kind of a release, a permission to go discover something. So, and you're experiencing the same thing, and I celebrate that. So
thank you very much. It's been a real I know it's been 50 minutes, and it feels like it was like 20.
Yeah,
we've been talking about so much stuff and diving into different areas. It's been really,
we have a lot in common. Yeah,
I think we do. Yes.
And I'm going to go read Grant Morrison's book again, because now I have incentive to go do that, and then we can talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Thank you.
Really.
Thank you, Roberto. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Please subscribe and hit the like button. But even more so, please comment and leave a question or comment that we can interact with you and have conversation with you. That's one of the reasons I do this. And it's so much fun. Thank you again, Roberto. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you for watching the Eddie Network podcast. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.